And welcome back to our second episode of Beyond the Faceoff, from first puck drop to overtime with Ryan Galloway. And before we get started on today's episode, Ryan, why don't you just give a little bit of a reminder about how you got started in officiating and what sort of drew you into it?
Thanks, Kev. Um, yeah, I started refereeing when I was about 10 years old. Just got involved with some community club stuff. My neighbors were looking for somebody to come and ref their young kids, little 5, 6, 7-year-old game, and basically just dropping the puck and pulling it out of the net. And it was something I had just formed a passion for. And when I was 12, was able to go through the formal certification process with Hockey Manitoba and Hockey Canada, and I was able to progress up through the ranks. And 18 years later, made the jump to the professional league and worked the NHL for 22 seasons.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, I was actually going to ask about that. It's like when you first started in the last episode, you said your neighbor just asked you to come out and do the game. It's like, but what about the rules? Like, didn't you know the rules, and how do you officially go through that? So I'm kind of curious about the whole certification process. Can you explain what it means and how to achieve certification to get you to that professional level?
Sure. Well, first off, when I was doing those games for Mr. Dale back in McBay in Winnipeg, there were no rules. It was pull the puck out of the net when they score a goal and take the puck back to center ice and drop the puck. It's like dogs chasing a ball. The kids just there's no offside, there's no icing, there's no penalties. I mean, most of the time, if the kid's on the ice, it's probably because he tripped himself. So it was there really were no rules at that level. But so the certification process in Canada, it was. I know it's changed recently, but it still basically follows the same format. It was a 6-level certification process. You start off as a level 1, and that gives you the ability to go and work young kids hockey. And the general rule of thumb is you referee games that are 2 years younger than you would be your highest level. And I mean that just makes sense from putting a young official in a spot where he's not dealing with people that are older than him, and basically at the same skill level that he would have as an official. So then it goes up all the way to level 6, which level 6 is the highest level you can attain. It's you're selected by Hockey Canada to get to that level. You have to be nominated by your branch, and then Hockey Canada takes the ball from there and makes the decisions based off of how you perform in games to be able to attain that level. Now, I think at the time there was no more than maybe 50 or 60 level 6s across the country out of 35,000 officials. So it was a pretty elite level to get to. I never got to that level. I got as high as level 5, which is the highest level that the branch can decide and nominate for. That gives you the ability to work international tournaments, both as a referee and linesman. I was fortunate to have been able to skate a couple international tournaments and some pre-tournament games with Hockey Canada. But it's an annual recertification process. It involves going to a clinic. Again, that's changed in the past couple of years since COVID. More things have gone online, but it's still it's a classroom setting. There was an on-ice session as well. And as you go up through the different levels, there becomes other obligations. The rules test no longer becomes a multiple choice. It becomes a state referee decision where you actually have to write out the answer and basically answer it verbatim out of the rule book. And then there's other obligations that come along with it, of fitness testing and ice testing, to make sure you fulfill what the expectations are to work the higher levels of hockey, both in the branch and at the international level.
Yeah, I knew that was quite an extensive certification, as with any other sports that you actually get involved with, especially at like a coaching or even an officiating level, just so that you do know what the rules of the sport are, and so that you are playing the sport or playing the game within those set of rules. So, yeah, it definitely does take up a lot of time to get to know those rules down pat. And yeah, I suppose as a young person getting into it, it may seem sort of a bit overwhelming to see. Like, I remember reading the rule book. It's like it's a thick book, and I have to memorize all of this.
Yeah.
So
And I mean the greatest lessons happen once you finally step out on the ice. I mean you go to your clinic and you know get the textbook version of what to happen, but until you actually step out on the ice and
mhm.
experience the different plays and experience what actually goes on in the rink, and to be guided by mentors and coaches and officiating coaches of you know what you need to do to further progress and develop your skills. It's definitely an on the job training, but the certification process is a very important part of it.
Yeah. And yeah, as you're starting out in any career, of course, it always comes with its challenges as you're starting out. So, what were some of the biggest obstacles that you faced as you began your journey as a referee?
Well, I know for myself, it's about getting the reps. That's the first challenge to overcome. It's getting the ability to work the games, and there's plenty of hockey, but there's also plenty of young kids that are getting involved with officiating. So to be able to get the number of games necessary to really hone your skills, that's probably the biggest challenge, or the earliest challenge you have to overcome. Then from there, it's establishing kind of your standard, the way you work a game, and growing that thick skin of when you do have some adversity, be it from the on the ice or from the bench or from the parents, of how you deal and how you respond to that. It's not a it's not an easy job, as I'm sure most people realize, um, and that like any job, you need to have the experience and the repetition of having those experiences, that when they do happen, they just become second nature. I compare it to a pilot. You know, the pilot sits there for, I don't I don't mean to downplay the skills of a pilot in any sense by saying this, but I get the assumption that it's a lot of time of just the same thing happening over and over again, and it's when something critical happens and how you respond to it, and to be able to respond to it in an instance, is what really defines the job. And the same thing goes for officiating. You know, you see the one-off situations that happen, and they happen once or twice, and you learn how to respond to it, so that when it happens again, it just becomes second nature. And
Mm.
that's one of the biggest things with officials, is getting the experience to have those situations happen and be able to respond to them without necessarily having to consciously think about it.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Like every career has its defining moments as well. Was there a particular milestone or achievement that solidified your decision to make refereeing a profession for yourself?
Well, I go back to what I said. First of all, I mean, I had a passion for it right from when I
Yeah.
started, and I realized that it was something that I absolutely loved. And obviously, that's the most important thing, is finding something you love, and everything that comes along with it becomes a lot easier to attain, because it's something you've set your goals towards. When Ian Heather came to me and said, when I was 17 or 18 years old, of if you stick with it and work hard, you might be able to make a career out of it. And then everything that came along with that through my amateur career, um, it just sort of feeds that desire. So you get one opportunity, and you hopefully take that opportunity and learn from it, and represent yourself well, so that when the next opportunity comes around, you get that you get that nod to, whether it's working a final game in the championship series, or the opportunity to go and work different tournaments, whether they be nationally or internationally, um, to be able to respond when those opportunities come along, so that when that next opportunity comes along, they go, yeah, no, he can handle it. He proved himself in that last game, and he's ready to make that step to the next thing. That's the one thing with officiating, is we don't think of it the same way as we think of players, but it's such a progression of working your way up through the different levels, right from 5, 6, 7-year olds all the way up to working professional hockey. It's a it's a progression. It's a step forward, and you hope that when you're presented with that next opportunity to take a step forward, that you're ready for it and you respond accordingly.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just dive into that professional side of officiating? What kind of training and preparation is required or involved in becoming a professional referee?
So obviously it's the on the job training of working the amateur hockey, and that's going to be your foundation, your building blocks of being able to progress up through the levels. Um, Going to the certification clinics every year and learning from different officials and learning from their experiences, so that you might not always necessarily need to experience it yourself, but having heard how somebody else has responded to that situation, so that when that situation happens to you, you've got some source of a background to guide your decision. Um, from there, I went to a couple of different schools, referee camps. The Western Hockey League used to, actually they still do. They ran a referee clinic that was over and above the certification clinic, and being exposed to professional officials like Kerry Fraser, Mike Civic, Lyle Seitz, Mark Wheeler, Dan Marawelli, who would be there as guest instructors, who could share their knowledge and their experience of what they, not only what they did to progress up to the NHL, but also their experiences at the NHL,
Mm-hmm.
helped give you some guidance and um, tips that you probably wouldn't have got elsewhere. So anybody who's trying to make their way up to the professional level, I strongly encourage that. There's plenty of different referee schools around. Take advantage of those and learn from very experienced officials that can help you as you progress up through the different ranks.
Yeah, yeah, sort of play along that the annual clinics and certification process. The game evolves constantly, and there's always new rules that are being implemented into the game. So, how do you stay current with all of these new rules? And then, sort of as a second, how do you ensure that you're in peak physical condition to keep up with the speed of the game as it seems to have sped up so much over the years?
Sure. Well, to answer your question, the game of hockey is fascinating. It's every year there seems to be new rules and new nuances, and what always happens, and I think it's probably in every sport. Every time you come up with a new rule, there's something that happens that just springs up organically as a result of introducing a new rule. So now we have to put in another new rule to hopefully deal with the situation that arose. So at the certification clinics, there's rule sessions and lengthy study of the rule book and procedure manual and situation handbook that again you do that annually. So you get that knowledge on an annual basis, but it's also important that officials constantly are reading the rule book and looking for those little what ifs and those little plays that everybody knows what a trip is, everybody knows what an offside is, but it's those ones that only happen on a rare occasion that you need to know and need to be able to respond to. So it's imperative that referees are constantly looking at the rule book and constantly learning things. At the professional level, it's the same thing. There was new rules that would come up every year. We would go to training camp every September, and it was a week long session that involved both on ice work and off ice. But there was extensive work that was put into the rule book and learning the new rules. And it wasn't only a case of just learning the new rules, but also a lot of video studies of, all right, here's the play that we're talking about now. How would you call that situation? What penalty? How would you handle that situation? So it was a multifaceted approach of not just looking at the rulebook, but also getting that video footage to be able to learn from a practical experience.
Yeah, and just to jump in here, were there any rule introductions at the higher level? Do those rules sort of then cascade down to the other leagues as well? And just wondered if there ever was a situation where you were in a position where the rule changed in one league, but it didn't change in the other. Like I know international ice hockey rules differ than professional, so there's a bit of difference there. But wondering within the leagues that you've been involved with, have you ever had to um, know the rule for the various games that you were either linesing or refing?
Well, that's the bane of existence for officials is most leagues have their own. They all generally follow the same rule book, but there's always nuances and differences
Mm.
between the leagues. So when you're working amateur hockey, you might be working a junior game tonight that plays under a different, not a completely different set of rules, but some different rules that if you were working a midget AAA game or a Pee Wee game would be significantly different.
Okay.
Now, to answer your question about rules filtering down, the leagues are getting better at trying to work off of the NHL rulebook and using that as
Mm.
kind of their standard, and then adopting it and adjusting it accordingly. Obviously, the stuff that happens in the NHL and the skill of the players isn't necessarily going to be the same as what's going to happen at a junior level or a minor hockey level.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be slight adjustments, but they've done a good job of trying to overall use the same general rules, um, and it's been good. I look at when we came out of the first lockout, was that 2006, 2005 in the NHL, and we went to a really tighter standard on hooking, holding, the encroachment, or sorry, I lost the word. The rules that are impeding the flow of the game, where
Mm.
like the real skilled players can make fantastic plays, which is what we see now. When you take a look at the old the old NHL and you see Wayne Gretzky skating down the ice with a player basically on his back, hooking and holding him all the way down the ice, and you see where the game is now, where you have the players like Crosby and that are just able to truly show their skills. And what that did was it sort of eliminated the hockey's still a tough game, but it eliminated that need for the fighting, which when I first started, we were probably averaging one to two, maybe three fights a game, and I think we're down
Mm.
now in the NHL to one fight every 3 or 4 games. So
Wow.
that part of the game has come out. So what happened was when the NHL brought that in, the other leagues had to the I would say lower, but the junior leagues and the midget AAA's and those levels of hockey had to adjust their rules, because in order for their players to advance to the NHL, well, they have to be playing within
Yeah.
those rules and those standards. So it's been good. I think it's been good overall that the rule book and the standard of enforcement has gone from the professional level down to the amateur level. And I think that's just helped hockey tremendously.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Um, sort of to go back about asking about your training and sort of being in peak physical condition for officiating, and also maybe it can incorporate into the balancing life and work and working out in there as well. So, how did you manage your personal life along the demands of this officiating career? You did touch a bit on it last episode, but yeah, maybe incorporate like some of the training that you had to do on your own to make sure that you were fit for officiating.
I remember hearing stories when I first got into the league of not only the officials training camp, but players training camps that were 2, 3 weeks long, because the players weren't making the money they are now. The officials weren't making the money they are now. That they would have to have jobs in the summer that to carry them through, and so they would come to training camp to get in shape. Well, that's not what happens now. I mean, the expectation is that when I showed up to training camp, I was ready to go, and be in top shape to be able to handle the requirements of the game. So yeah, generally what would happen was at the end of the season I would take a couple of weeks off just to let my body heal and give it some time to recover. But generally within start of June, I'm back into training mode, and um, it was a lot of time spent in the gym or out on the road cycling and swimming, rowing, whatever it was. But you you need to. And I retired at 52. Sorry, 51. Um, and I'm skating out there with 19, 20 year olds that legitimately can skate circles around me. But I needed to be able to keep up in order to get to the lines, to make the proper sight lines, to be physically able to handle players when we did have the fights. So there was no opportunity to take time off. You had to be fit. Now we have a cottage up in Manitoba, and the great thing about having a cottage is you can turn anything into a workout. Whether it's
Hmm.
chopping firewood, whether it's doing yard work, you could turn anything into a workout. Going for a paddle in the canoe or the kayak, you were able to turn that into a workout. So I was able to not just sit in a gym and ride an exercise bike. I was able to do other things that were fulfilling the requirements that I needed to be able to physically do the job.
And did you, as you were saying, everything can be a workout out like at your cottage? Did you sort of think about the different jobs and about the different muscles and things that you're keeping trained? Specifically, like you're saying, chopping wood. Uh, did you sort of analyze? Well, that's going to be working on this, so I need to chop more wood for like 30 minutes as opposed to, oh, I just need this enough for tonight, sort of thing.
Yeah, you know what, Kevin? Honestly, this might sound cheesy, but there wasn't a single decision that I made for probably well the better part of 40 years that didn't some way have to go back to how is this going to help, or how could it diminish what my goals are? How would it prevent me from doing what I want to achieve?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're always thinking about, is this a good decision? Is this the right thing to do? Could I be doing it a different way? Could I, I'm out at the cottage and I'm chopping wood, or I'm even going for, let's say I went for a water ski on the lake. I'm always constantly thinking, all right, now what happens if I get hurt and I'm not able to do my job?
Yeah.
So it was always in the back of your mind, um, that you needed to keep that stuff in mind of how it would impact. I would never wear safety glasses. I would, again, this is going to sound really cheesy, but I would never wear safety glasses when I was doing stuff with tools and even cutting branches. I would never think about that until I came to the realization that if I don't take care of my eyes, I'm not going to have a career. So
Yeah.
even the smallest things became something that somehow related and translated to my profession.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It's like sort of as you grow older and wiser, it's like, maybe those things were meant for a purpose. And specifically with your line of work, it's like, yeah, you have to keep your eyes 100% to be able to perform your job duty 100% of the time.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to your question about balancing work and life. I would spend enough time at the rinks that when I would get home, I had to disconnect from the game. I didn't do a lot of watching games on TV,
Mm-hmm.
because to me that time at home was important for my relationship with my wife, and to me that was, you had to have that balance, to be able to say no, I'm home, I'm fully at home, and our limited time that we have between road trips is our time, and we're going to spend that time together. Now, of course, you watch games and you try to keep up with what's going on so that you're prepared for the next time you go on the road. But I really had to have that time to disconnect from it,
Mm-hmm.
both for personal reasons, relationship reasons, but also for a mental
Yeah.
break from it too.
Yeah.
When you're working under a microscope and always having to be on, you have to have that ability to have that off switch and get away from the game. I tell young officials all the time, like I think summer hockey is great and it's great to get out there skating more games, but as an official, you still need to have that time away from the game where you become well rounded and you have time away from it where you get excited in the fall to okay, now it's time to start reffing hockey again.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that you have that disconnect and a little bit of time away from the game as well to have that break.
Okay. Well, speaking of breaks, let's think of the exact opposite. How about high pressure situations here? Have you ever had to make a critical decision during a game that has had a significant impact on the result of the game? And sort of how did you handle that pressure?
Yeah, I mean that happens on a nightly basis of the decisions we make and how they can impact. And when I turned pro and I realized the business side of it and the livelihoods that were involved with it, it kind of changes your perspective on the game in that there's a whole lot of reliance on you doing your job to the best, and that filters down. That goes all the way down to junior hockey and young kids hockey. Those kids are aspiring to the next level, so it's important that you're always on and you're ready to respond to things when they happen. Um, so I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. The I jokingly said this to a friend of mine. He still loves telling me this every time I see him. I used to say, I made $1 million decisions every single night. He's like, "What are you talking about? You make $1 million decisions?" And I said, "Well, listen, if I blow an offside call or I do something in a game that impacts a team, and it might not be right now that necessarily impacts them, but now we're getting down to the end of the season, and they're behind on 1 point, and it's they could have had that point because of that missed call that you made." Yeah, so I jokingly said I make $1 million decisions every night, but in practicality, there is some truth to that. Is the the ramifications of not being on and making the right calls. And listen, we all make mistakes. That's just human. But you do everything you can to try to minimize that.
Well, Ryan, I do appreciate you taking the time out to deal with some more questions from me, and believe me, I have a lot more to ask of you. So, if you want to hear more about Ryan's experiences, make sure that you do like, subscribe, and do all the things to make sure that you are notified when we do put a new video up. So, I'm going to leave the last word to you, Ryan, and why don't you give the people a bit of an explanation about what this whole series is about, just so that they know what to expect in the upcoming episodes.
Sure. When you approached me, Kev, about doing this, I really didn't want to get into the, who's the toughest player and what was the biggest fight and who's the biggest jerk on the ice. I didn't want to get into that. I think there's enough places that people can go to get that kind of information and satisfy that kind of interest. To me, this was more important. And as I've left the ice, the overtime portion of my career has now started, where it's what can I do? How can I give back to the game? And to me, that's what this was about, was being able to share my stories, share my journeys, share some of my mindsets of what I needed to do to get to the levels and experience the things that I did, and to be able to share that with officials and hopefully motivate and inspire them and give them some of that information, so that as they're going through their journey, maybe there's some tidbits and some different ideas that they can pick up from this that they'll be able to apply in their game. But I think it's also an opportunity for people who might not have any connection to officiating to see how officials view the game, the amount of work and effort that officials put into it. We just had a Thank the Stripes weekend here in Manitoba, and one of the stories I read about one of the young officials in the province, and seeing how much stuff that she does, not only in her officiating but in her job, and how involved her family is in the game, just to get that idea of how much officials aren't just there to take the money from the game and provide a service. We're there for the love of the game, and to be able to share that with the average person that maybe gives them a little bit of an inside view and a different perspective on what officials are actually all about. So that's kind of my mindset of where this is going to lead and where this is going to go, and I'm looking forward to seeing where these next few episodes take us.